Welcome to the Mercy Cast, where we're learning the art of compassion through the adversity of life. I'm your host, Raleigh Sadler. The pandemic showed us a rise in social anxiety because, let's be honest, we spent, for some of us, years not really around anyone, and all of a sudden now we have to re-enter the workforce. Now we have to re-enter social gatherings like parties and networking events. And this can be really tricky because now we have to relearn how to be around people. So there has been a rise in people feeling these feelings of social anxiety, people feeling like they don't fit or they're not enough or they don't look the part. This can lead to imposter syndrome and all sorts of things. But at the end of the day, I believe that all of us in some way have experienced a form of social anxiety. Tamara is like all of us. As she compared herself to others, she found herself feeling anxiety in social situations. Today, I'm joined by Tamara Pflug. She is a fun and confidence coach. She is the host of the Get Confident, Get Happy podcast. Tamara, welcome to the Mercy Cast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. Thank you.
I am too, because you are actually the first fun and confidence coach I've ever had on the show. So that means something. Really
does. And probably I'm the only one that exists. I always write my email in the end, I write down the only one, because I don't think that everybody will call themselves like this. You need kind of like believing that it's something,
Well, and when you and I talked before, I was really just intrigued as we were talking about this idea of social anxiety, because so many of us face it and so many of us don't know what to do. Oftentimes we retreat into ourselves. We avoid people because we have these feelings of dread. Like we're comparing ourselves to others, and that can be overwhelming. Like, how did you recognize this in yourself, that you were comparing yourself to others and that you were experiencing social anxiety?
Yes, that's a great question. And I think this is actually how it all started. And this is actually a first great tip for people that wants to take a distance, to raise awareness around what kind of situation they feel social anxious about. I think I was really, in my head when I was around people, and I was not only around people, but I found myself, as you described, comparing myself to others. And what happened, and this is what I want to share with your listeners, is that I realized that what I was thinking, it was just thoughts, actually, but I was believing everything my brain was telling me. And, from my own experience that you mentioned, and also the work that I do with amazing clients, I realized that social anxiety, it comes down, to thoughts such as, I'm uncomfortable, like, this is weird, or I'm different, I prefer to be home. This kind of thoughts, the fact that we feel, like it is awkward, like social anxiety, is because we believe that these thoughts are the reality, but actually it's an interpretation of the reality. It's what we're thinking, which is where our power resides. So to come back to the moment when it all started, I had kind of, they call it breakthrough, but I just realized I'm thinking this. So it's in my head, deep down.
And so you mentioned this idea of they were just thoughts. That's so interesting to me because you're right. We think they're reality. We think that this is the end all be all. That would be the phrase, that this is the end all be all, that this is the truth, when it's just a thought and it could come or go. Tell me a little bit more about how you recognize that it's just a thought. It's not your identity. It's not reality. It's a passing thought, and it's okay to let it go.
Yes. So, we all have 60,000 thoughts per day. It's like driving a car. Like, I know that in the US, they usually drive automatic, but in Europe, we always learn manual. And it's like, you just at the start, you really pay attention to how you drive, and then you put it on automatic, on autopilot. And it's exactly the same with thoughts. Most of the people, I would say 98% of people, are not even aware that they have 60,000 thoughts per day, and they just believe that it's the reality. But this is why, you take one event, like one same situation, let's say a birthday party, and you have two people that have completely different thoughts about the same event. And you're like, no, that sounds weird, but this is the reason why, because we all believe that our thoughts are true. We think that it's just the reality we describe, we're reporting the news, but actually just an interpretation of the reality. It's like wearing glasses. You're wearing glasses. I do too.
Yeah.
And we have really different way of, interpreting the reality, like considering our experiences, our values, so this is again where our power resides and where we deep down create all of this social anxiety. It's actually created in our head, which again is very empowering, because if we want to change it, we don't have to change the people that should behave nicer around us so we don't feel this way. The only thing that has to change is what you said, like first paying attention to what we're thinking.
And so there seems to be a life cycle of social anxiety. There's this idea where it begins as an idea, begins as a thought, but then it grows. And so for our social anxiety to even be a thing, it has to go from thought to something else. What happens next when we have that thought and we cling to it?
So it's one of the coaching tools that I use the most, and that you can use for any situation, any struggle, any problem you're facing. And it's coming down to the idea of cognitive behavioral therapy, which says basically that your thoughts create your reality. Like from what you're thinking, like every thought generates a feeling. And then from that feeling, you take action or non-action when it comes to the gym. Just talking about experience. Like I feel dread, so I'm not taking the action of going to the gym. So again, it's really, you have what you're thinking that generate emotions. And then from this emotion, we take action or we don't take action. And this action actually give us a result in our life. And yeah, tell me what you're thinking.
No, yeah. So yeah, exactly. So thoughts lead to feeling, which lead to behavior, right? And so do you think it's important for us to kind of identify as we're experiencing anxious thoughts or anxiety to identify what's happening? Like, is this just a thought? Is this a feeling? Is this a behavior? And then kind of working backwards. So if it is like, I'm afraid to go to the gym because there's too many people, then, well, what is the feeling behind that? And then what's the thought that's driving it? Is that kind of what you're saying, how they're connected?
Yes, exactly. And when I first learned this, I felt kind of relieved. I think it's like, we all love being at home because it's familiar to us and the brain loves what is familiar. So I do believe that exactly what you say, when you can kind of classify it, or this is a thought, this is a feeling, this is a behavior or an action, it just makes us more comfortable because we know, and I like to say this all the time, that we are not our thoughts, we are not our feeling, and we are not our action. And I think it is very, very essential. And this is in a nutshell, I think coaching is really, again, empowering ourselves without having to change the world and other people around us to, for example, solve and feel better around people in a social situation. But it's really about paying attention to our thoughts. And to give an example, just imagine two kinds of people. Again, nothing's being wrong. We're just looking at it from a place of compassion and curiosity. But just imagine two kinds of people. One is thinking, I'm uncomfortable in this situation. And one is thinking, I'm okay right now. Like we don't have to thrive around being around people, but just something more neutral. And just imagine these two people, how they behave in one situation. Of course, in the middle, there is the feeling, but just imagine I'm uncomfortable in this situation. And on the other side, I'm okay right now. The behavior is completely different. That makes sense.
No, it does make sense. And I love how you mentioned two different people, because you can have two different people in the same place with two different outcomes, because one is more self-confident while one may be more insecure in a way. And we all are complex beings. We all have so many insecurities, and we have things that we can be confident about. But how do you go from being that person who is insecure to that person who's able to actually face that anxiety and say, okay, it's just a thought. It's not my reality, nor is it my identity, and I'm going to be okay.
Yes. It feels so good to tell myself this. I think also it's not, people see it a lot and it's a cognitive bias. The brain is really efficient and just like shortcuts. So one of a cognitive bias that I love, that really to me changed so much in my life, is the black and white thinking. When you think about it, it's in situation we see ourselves as very insecure and we want to be super confident, like basically the king, the queen of the room, and everybody has their eyes on us. I'm just saying like this could be like too extreme. But there is a middle, like a neutral place where we can find ourselves exactly with what you're saying, by just paying attention to what we're actually thinking in the situation. So I love, things that are very simple and things that we can apply right away in our life. So I think the very, very first step, it's exactly what you said about not identifying ourselves with what we're thinking, is just to pay attention in social anxiety situation that I find myself with, in what am I actually thinking that makes me feel this anxiety. And then I would actually talk about feeling anxious, that we make it sound that it's a big problem, something that we have to solve. That's I find interesting also. It's another direction to just have a look at. Of course, we all find ourselves feeling this social anxiety. I think it's the part of our brain that is a bit primitive and that just wants us to be a part of the tribe. And I think we talked about this, you and me, right?
Yeah, this idea that maybe our social anxiety could be a natural thing, that your body is trying to protect you. And it's saying, there's a lot going on right now. You need to be cognizant of this. And so that thought or that feeling even is not necessarily a bad thing if we can just understand what it is. And I think that's what you're saying. I love how you're talking about we got to pay attention to what we're thinking, because self-awareness is so important, but this is part of it. What am I feeling in this moment? What am I thinking in this moment? What lies do I believe? What are self-limiting beliefs that I am adhering to right now? And how would you say that we pay attention? Because that can be hard. Self-awareness can be very tricky. It's very easy to focus on everything else and be distracted by life rather than focus on what we are processing in that moment. And so how do we grow in that way to where we can pay attention to what we're thinking?
Yes, it's a great question. I think this is often, we can use personal development or like self-improvement a bit against ourselves, like thinking that we need this, to be worthy and we need to fix ourselves. But I like to look at really everything that we find from a place of compassion and curiosity, never to use it to beat ourselves up, but to really find a way to actually accept, be curious around who we are and love ourselves more. Yeah, this is the confidence coach talking. I would say really again, it doesn't have to be overwhelming with, I have to pay attention to the 60,000 thoughts I think on a daily basis. Just pay attention to one thought you may be thinking. I think social anxiety, we all have this primitive part of our brain, like from the cave women and men. And we can imagine a situation, as you mentioned before, the comparing, like I used to compare myself a lot. And we can imagine ourselves in this situation, which maybe it's a different situation for you. And we can just close our eyes and imagine one or two thoughts. Why, just the answer to the question of why do we feel social anxious? Is it a thing to say like this in English? To feel social anxious in this situation. And I would say the first thought that comes to my mind, like, why do I feel this way? It's because this will give you the thought you're thinking. My thought would be, I'm probably different than other people. And boom, you have one thought.
Yeah, I've been in social situations where I walk in and I'm like, well, I'm not as blank as this person. And it could be anything. I'm not as accomplished as this person, or I'm not as funny as this person. And now I'm comparing. And so it's that thought of comparison that drives the insecurity, or that feeds the insecurity rather. And you'd mentioned this idea that a lot of us seem to want to completely get rid of any social anxiety in our lives. And there could be a positive aspect to it. There could be a positive spin on it, maybe in moderation when we're aware of it. But it seems like you're saying that social anxiety could be part of us, and the impulse to get rid of it may be short-sighted. But what if we recognize that, yes, this is a part of us, but we don't have to give it the driver's seat per se. We don't have to let it take control of us. What do you think about that?
Yeah, you have a great memory because we just talked about it. Was it last week? It's true. I think that all of these uncomfortable emotions, because I don't want to say negative ones, because just by saying it, we're already stating what we think they are.
Uncomfortable emotions. That's a good way to say it.
Exactly. I think that actually we could all have, look, I'm building a career on being a confidence coach, and I do feel sometimes social anxiety, and it's not supposed to be a part of the character, but I actually embrace it. I agree with what you're saying. I think that what if we put it in the backseat of the car, the tank is full, I'm driving, it's okay to have this negative, quote unquote, uncomfortable emotion, because this is just, again, the human brain is just nice to reassure ourselves that nothing's wrong with us. It just it goes back also another number. 85% of what we think on a daily basis is negative because the brain is looking for danger. It's again our brain's job that is not to make us happy, but to keep us alive. So what if actually I just have a normal brain, you to everybody, that is actually doing a perfect job and is going to offer me these thoughts that maybe you're not fitting, maybe you're not normal because he wants to make sure that you're going to stay a part of the tribe. And what if nothing's wrong with anxiety? And I agree with you. Even there are some people, that say, let's befriend every kind of emotion. There are a lot of people. I listened to a podcast and like a lot of people, it was one person and she said, every day I'm waking up with anxiety and I never lived a happier life ever. Like what if we would actually make peace with feeling stressed, feeling angry? Because again, an emotion is 90 seconds, but the problem is what we make it mean, going into spiral and living as, people say, I'm an angry person. I wonder how this person goes down the street thinking that they are an anxious person,
And do you think there's something to this idea of making peace with it and saying, okay, like, yeah, this is part of me and that's okay. Like, this is part of every human. We're all designed in this way to where we will all have anxiety. And that doesn't mean that I'm less than. That doesn't mean that I'm weird or strange. It just means that I'm like everyone else. And so the thing I'm so scared of actually leads me back to the solution. It's like you're in in those situations where we experience social anxiety, it's very easy to think I'm different and that's what's driving it. When in reality, that very impulse is proof that we're just like everybody else.
And you pointed at it before, and I think I love, in my coaching also to break the rules and turn things upside down. I think that everything is permitted because I've decided so. But like, what do you think? You liked it now. But I think, what do you think about the benefits of social anxiety? Like, why do you think the brain is offering us this? Like, what is the good thing about it? I'm trying this week to break down. I'm really around stress, like trying to accept and befriend stress. I'm like, what's good about stress? And then I'm like, I can do stress, again, like what do you think about?
Well, I think that's such a good question. I had a coach once who I was complaining about something I did that I felt like I just felt bad about. And then he was like, well, what's the good thing about that? And I'm like, there's nothing good. It's the worst decision I've ever made. I'm a terrible person. Da, 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 da. I was in a little bit of a spiral. I wasn't feeling great. I wasn't happy. I just was beating myself up because I made some mistake. And he's like, but what's the good part? And I think when we look at the good part, kind of like what you're saying, is it's in terms of moderation. Like if we acknowledge that it's there and we own it and we know it's there, we're able to not be led by it. And so in small doses, social anxiety, I would assume, can help us think through how we're going to approach things. It can help us see more angles in social situations as we are engaging something that may have a lot of meaning or may matter to a lot of people or may matter just to us. We're able to kind of look into it. Now, if we let it completely overtake us, it will paralyze us. But I would wonder if we kind of took a small inoculation, like a tiny dose of it, if that wouldn't help us be more balanced. Because I feel like that's the name of the game. It's not completely getting rid of any negative emotion or any emotion for that matter. It's saying, how do we live balanced lives? How can we be aware of what we're experiencing so that it doesn't rule us?
Yes, I think that it's about really what you said, embracing all the emotions, like the buffet. I believe actually that life is 50-50. It's like a big burrito and you have good things, adversity, like bad things, quote unquote. I also tend to believe, but I agree, I understand what you felt when your coach asked you this question. I do believe there is a gift and an opportunity in every adversity situation, it's not always easy to see it at first, but I do believe that things that we feel like mad or bad about, it's always an opportunity to like have more wisdom. And just, it goes actually to this idea, my sentences following next to each other. I believe also in the idea of having unconditional love for other people, but for ourselves also, just because it feels so good than having manual as to how people should behave or we should behave, as people or us ourselves, And I think this unconditional love is really going with the idea of, embracing this burrito of life, and just maybe it's having a human experience. And, when I'm saying that 50% of the time we feel positive, comfortable emotions, 50% negative because of this cognitive bias. So it's called, I think, the negative bias. The thing here is really to embrace both of them. Often when it comes to the negative emotion or feelings, I hear a lot, people will find themselves overspending, over drinking, overeating to cover this natural tendency to sometimes feel negative emotion. But if we will just embrace it, we'll just feel bad, and actually it will pass. We tend to always say that good things come to an end. I believe that bad things do too. And we all remember a time we got super mad, then we get better. So I think if we would learn this at school, and just not feel bad about feeling bad, but would all embrace not needing to eat ice cream when we feel bad, just feeling bad, and that's it, not adding another layer of feeling bad.
Yeah, just I feel bad. And I don't like it.
Yes.
And that's okay. It's
No, but you see how it's simple. I think that is why when you say unsocial anxiety, okay, it's like people, now I would always ask you, okay, you feel social anxious, now what? What's the problem here? And then people, again, it's what we make it mean. I don't want to go out. Nobody loves me. There's nothing wrong with having it in the backseat. Because deep down, social anxiety depends and I like to ask people, why do you want to meet people? Do you want, people forget that it's a choice they're making to be social, to meet people, if it's what they want, but it's not black and white. You could have 10% of social anxiety and 90% of sitting there and having an anthropological experience, looking at people.
Yeah. And Tamara, I love what you're saying about how life is a burrito. Because, I love a burrito. They're delicious. Put a little hot sauce on there, a little sour cream, a little cheese. It's perfect. And I think what makes it perfect is just, it is like a cacophony of flavors. There are so many things involved. And there are things that in some ways shouldn't go together. There's no reason that these things should be together, but they're there. And somehow, some way, in this universe and in this moment, they work. They come together and they work. And as I think about just the human experience, and I think it's very easy to just see myself and others in terms of good or bad, no in between. And as I've grown as a person, one thing I've noticed is, no, we're all just people, and there's good in us and there's bad in us. There are moments where we shine, and then there are moments where we hide in the shadows. And I think when we embrace both the good thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and the bad thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, and we just simply acknowledge or mentally assent to the fact that they are there, that they are present, that we are not in denial anymore, but that we accept, this is who I am, this is where I am. It's in those moments where we're moving towards a more wholehearted approach to life, because now we are kind of embracing ourselves as a whole rather than really hating one thing that we're experiencing. We're just saying, it's there and it's okay. Everyone is dealing with this in some way. Even if they come off as the most confident person in the world, there is some insecurity that's hounding them. And there are moments where they don't feel safe, because that's part of the design. That's part of how we are made up. Would you agree, disagree? What are your thoughts?
100% agree, which could be not interesting enough maybe for people. No, I think that it goes with what you started by saying, with COVID, that I think deep down, as much as it's hard to go back to being with people, if we are with these people, which is maybe the cause of social anxiety, is that we do want to connect on a deep level with people. And then we feel this disconnection, this separation. This is why we feel this way, this social anxiety. So I think, when we go back to the idea of what's good about being anxious, socially speaking, it's really the idea of, when you find compassion and curiosity towards exactly what you just described now, like our humanity, the way that our brain works, we are going to find it towards other people also. And I see the very first thing to me, at least when people, for example, tell me that they compare themselves a lot to other people, I know, like, I totally get them because I was there too. So I do believe actually that people that feel social anxiety, they have kind of this superpower that they will always understand. They will always pay attention to other people that feels this way in the room, like people that feel this way, and we got them, because we've been like, we have the same thoughts. Like, I think this is what actually, after all, will connect us and bring us meaningful relationship, when we connect on a deep level and we find compassion for what other people are feeling, which going around with the idea of we are just human beings. We are all big messes, actually, but maybe it's just the way that it's supposed to be. Why not? Because it's actually the way it is. So let's accept it and even embrace it.
Well, and I love how you bring up the good aspect of social anxiety, because I think that's so important. I recently interviewed an author, Ike Miller, who wrote a book called Good Baggage. And he was talking about how oftentimes we see our baggage just through a negative lens. But what if we reached in the bag and realized there are some bad things in there? Sure, some negative things, but there's also some good things. There's some things that our baggage has taught us and can be used to promote healthy relationships. And I feel like you just keyed in on that when you said people with social anxiety will always pay attention to other people, will always be looking around the room. And we could use this thing that we may feel shame about, or this thing that may feel like it's paralyzing us. We can use that as our superpower too. We can leverage it. We can say, okay, I'm anxious, but what if I use this rather than letting it use me?
That's nice.
How do you think we get there? How do you think we get to a point where we can kind of accept it and then live with it in a way that promotes healthy relationships and not paralysis?
I think I would ask you the question. If I would coach somebody, and like, I would ask first, I always like to ask, in what situations exactly do you feel, this social anxiety? Because I think it's just important that people can relate to it, and people have always different situations. And then how could you accept it again, not having to loving it? Maybe this is a bit far-fetched to start with, but yeah, I would ask you the question. What do you think we could kind of accept it more than, again, loving it and thriving on it? The first step, just to accept.
Yeah, for me, I typically experience social anxiety to some degree when I'm speaking either at a conference or at a church, and the way they do things is completely different to how I've ever done it. So if I feel like I don't know how to do it, the thought is, well, you're going to mess up because you don't have enough information. The emotion is, well, you're going to be embarrassed. Like this is, I'm embarrassed because I don't know what to do. And then the behavior would be maybe to stutter a little bit more until I get confident and feel safe. But I think going into those situations and being like, okay, I don't know how things work here, but because I don't know, I'll ask a question or two on the front end to the person who's hosting the event and say, what are your expectations and what happens here? Or I'll just say, you know what, even though this is a different company, or this is a different church, or this is a different organization, that's okay. They're all people who are made up of the same stuff I am. And I'm just going to talk, and that's okay. I don't have to be perfect in this moment. I just have to be. That's the only thing I'm required to be right now, is me. I don't have to be the perfect version of me. I can just talk. And if I feel like I mess up, I can own it or not own it. I could just be. It's okay. And so I feel like that's one place where I start feeling those feelings of anxiety and worry and fear, because I may not know how to operate in that context.
Yes. And I think it's a very relatable situation, because even if now we're talking and people will get something from this podcast, we are still through again into our life, which again, we have been thinking, for myself, for 34 years, the same thoughts. We expect that in a half an hour podcast episode, we'll change all of our thoughts, not have anxiety, or put it in the backseat of the car, manage to drive to our destination. But I think here it's important to add just two things, that we have to be gentle to ourselves, also like with ourselves, and just understand, exactly what you described now, to expect our brain to offer us the same thought it's been offering us for 34 years. In the brain's, like in our brain, it looks like, I offer these thoughts to Tamara. It works very well because she's alive. I'm going to keep on offering. So we need basically to override this survival part, of our brain that is just see it. alive, and offering us it's never offering you the best thought ever that is serving us. It's offering you the quickest, the most, the one that we've been thinking,
Exactly. And I feel like that's a good segue in these final moments of this episode. Could you share with us a few pieces of advice that you would give us as we're trying to process and understand our own social anxiety?
The cherry on the cake. I think that in your situation was very relatable. Like I could see myself, even when I'm telling like a joke, in front of friends, because even if it's like people you don't know at church or you do know them, like friends, it's even like you're afraid from the tribe, point of view, they're not going to love me anymore. So I think to exactly what you said first, and it was my last point for today, so perfect, is to not taking it too seriously. Like also social anxiety, I think it's important. We want to improve ourselves, and you and me are working towards this mission together. And at the same time, we have to relax, like not taking it too easy. I believe that the universe conspires on our behalf, like when you get sick, then you get healthy again, like most of the time. So I'm just saying like here to take it easy, not making it so serious also, that it's just a little experiment. Like for sure, we will enjoy the journey more and the destination. So I would say really from the situation you gave us, which again is very relatable, to expect the thoughts, maybe like 4 of them. Exactly what you said. I think you said, they're not going to get you. Well, as you can see, I have a really poor auditive memory. Just to expect maybe 4 thoughts that our brain will offer us, and just to expect them when you're going to be in this situation again. And then be like, it's my brain. It's not me. It's just thoughts.
That is so good. It's my brain. It's not me. These are just thoughts. And to not take ourselves so seriously that we're ending up paralyzed. Tamara, thank you so much for joining me today. You gave us some good stuff today, so I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. You too, I have to say.
Thank you.
You could call yourself a confidence one.
See, now I'm a confidence coach, everybody. This is great.
Well, thank you so much. It's amazing.
Thank you. If you are interested in more stories like this one, buy my book, Vulnerable Rethinking Human Trafficking. Also, if you want bonus content, you can click on the link in the show notes to access our new and improved weekly bonus podcast, More Mercy, where I dive deeper into each episode. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and leave MercyCast a 5-star review. I want to hear from you. You can email me at info@mercycast.com. This podcast is brought to you by Let My People Go. To learn more about how you can love your most vulnerable neighbors through your own vulnerability, go to lmpg.org. Till next time, have mercy on yourselves and each other.